right, picture this. You're in Rome, year 67 AD. The Emperor Nero, basically the most powerful man on the planet, is walking through a crowded hall, and on his arm is his new wife, a beautiful woman dripping with imperial jewels. But there's no cheering. Instead, there are just whispers, because everyone in that room knows the chilling secret. The person they're looking at, this empress, was a teenage boy named Sporus, just a short time ago. And what Nero did to him is genuinely one of the most twisted and cruel stories you'll ever hear. Before we get into this forgotten story of survival against all odds, if you're into exploring the darker side of history, do us a favor and hit that like button and subscribe for more. And hey, drop a comment to let us know where you're watching from. It's honestly wild to think we're all diving into this together from different corners of the world. So what we're looking at here isn't just another tale of Roman excess, right? This is a story about how absolute power can warp love into obsession, grief into pure madness, and a living, breathing human being into a doll for a tyrant's fantasy. You probably never heard the name Sporus, but I promise, after this, you won't forget it. Let's start with the man behind it all. Believe it or not, Nero wasn't born a monster. In fact, when he became emperor as a teenager, people were thrilled. His first 5 years were so good they even have a name for it: the Quinquennium Neronis. He lowered taxes, funded public entertainment. He was, for a while, a popular and effective ruler. But power, especially absolute power, has a way of rotting things from the inside out. And by 65 AD, after murdering his own mother and purging anyone he saw as a threat, something in Nero's mind just broke. So what happened? Maybe it was the paranoia, knowing everyone around you wants you dead. Maybe it was the godlike isolation, where no one ever tells you no. Or maybe it was losing the one person he was obsessed with. Enter Poppaea Sabina. To Nero, she was the total package. Drop-dead gorgeous, smart enough to keep up with him, and just as ambitious. But she was no mere arm candy. Poppaea was a master political player. Now, at the time, Nero was stuck in a boring political marriage to a woman named Octavia. Poppaea was the exact opposite. She was exciting, she was commanding, and she loved being the center of attention. What started as a typical affair quickly spiraled into a full-blown obsession for Nero. He wasn't just in love, he was possessed. He divorced and then had Octavia killed, a move that horrified the public, just to marry Poppaea in a wedding that would make modern billionaires blush. But even that wasn't enough. He had to own her. He surrounded her with his spies, had countless statues of her made so he could see her even when she wasn't there. This wasn't romance. This was the behavior of a collector admiring his prized possession. And then, one day in 65 AD, it all came to a horrifying end. We don't know what they were arguing about, maybe Nero's obsession with chariot racing, but we know what happened next. In a fit of rage, the emperor, the ruler of the known world, kicked his heavily pregnant wife. The blow was so violent it killed her and their unborn child. Just try to imagine that moment. Nero, a man who saw himself as a god, realizes he just murdered the center of his universe with his own 2 hands. His reaction wasn't normal grief. It was a complete psychological shatter. He refused to cremate Poppaea's body, the Roman custom. Instead, he had her embalmed like a pharaoh, declared her a goddess, and would spend days talking to her corpse as if she could hear him. And it's in this fog of grief and madness that Nero sees a boy named Sporus. Sporus was a young freedman, maybe 15 years old, and his crime? He looked like Poppaea. The resemblance, they say, was uncanny. In Nero's broken brain, this was a solution, a way to cheat death. The fact that Sporus was a boy, a minor detail. What he did next was just monstrous. He ordered his doctors to castrate the boy, a brutal, irreversible surgery to make him feminine and to permanently destroy his identity. And once Sporus recovered, Nero announced he was going to marry him, publicly, legally. Sporus was given a new name, Sabina, and put through a horrifying re-education. Tutors taught him how to walk, talk, and act like a lady. He was forced to wear makeup and the elaborate clothes of the dead empress. Every piece of his old self was scoured away and replaced by a ghost. Can you even fathom the mental torture? Seeing a stranger in the mirror, knowing that any slip-up, any hint of your true self could get you killed. And the craziest part? Nero did it all out in the open. The wedding in 67 AD was a massive public ceremony. It had all the official rites, a dowry, vows, the works, all performed in front of a horrified but silent court. This was the ultimate power move, to not just do something insane, but to force the whole world to look at it and nod along as if it's perfectly normal. After that, Sporus was, for all intents and purposes, the Empress of Rome. He had the servants, the fancy litter, the whole deal. But it was a nightmare. Nero seemed to genuinely believe he had brought his wife back. He'd call Sporus by her name, kiss him in public, and talk about their shared memories. Every single day was a high-wire act for Sporus, flawlessly playing the part of a ghost for a man who held the power of life and death in his hands. This went on for nearly 2 years, but you can't run an empire on madness and murder forever. By 68 AD, everyone had had enough. The armies rebelled, the Senate declared Nero an enemy of the state, and he was forced to flee. And even in those last pathetic hours before his suicide, Sporus was right there with him. Nero couldn't leave his living doll behind. You'd think Nero's death would be a relief for Sporus, right? Wrong. In a way, what came next was even more tragic. He became a human trophy, a symbol of the dead tyrant, passed from one powerful man to the next. First, a commander named Nymphidius Sabinus took him. When he was killed, the future Emperor Otho, who had actually been Poppaea's first husband, took him in, a truly twisted turn of events. And when Otho died, Sporus was passed to the next emperor, Vitellius. And it was Vitellius who planned the final, most vile humiliation. He was going to use Sporus for entertainment. The plan was to force him into the Colosseum to be publicly, sexually assaulted in a reenactment of a famous myth, all for the amusement of the crowd. From empress to a public plaything. And that was the breaking point. Faced with that final, unbearable degradation, Sporus made the only choice he had left. Before he could be dragged into the arena, he took his own life. He was probably not even 20 years old. The true horror of his story isn't just the cruelty. It's the complete and total erasure of a person. The moment Nero saw him, Sporus was gone, replaced by a canvas for a madman's fantasy. That final act, choosing death over being an object of public humiliation, tells us that somewhere, deep down, a piece of the real him must have survived. It was his last, tragic act of defiance. We'll never know who that boy was, what he dreamed of, what his life could have been. All of it just wiped away. It's a brutal reminder that behind the grand monuments of history are real people, and some of their stories are cries for help that we can still hear, even 2,000 years later.